Dan Johnson here at the Midwest LSA Expo 2011. Today we have the opportunity to talk to Greg Ellsworth, who works for Aviation Insurance Resources,
right,
and is one of the folks that we count on when we want to go get insurance for one of these babies that we just decided to buy. You pretty much can't fly an airplane without insurance any more than you can fly it without gasoline, and we're glad that you're in the business. Greg, welcome to the Midwest LSA Expo.
Thank you.
I think you've been to all three of these, have you not?
Yeah, I was the first vendor to sign up.
That's right. That's so that's a great thing, and we appreciate that kind of support. Tell me what's going on in the insurance world. Is there anything new, different? Has the challenges gotten greater or lesser? How are things in insurance? And of course, specifically, we're talking about light sport aircraft here.
Right. Well, there's been a number of changes in the marketplace. Since this show started 3 years ago, we've had 2 or 3 new carriers enter the market, and a couple carriers with some major changes in the management. So now how does that translate to changes with LSAs? We have seen some carriers adding light sport aircraft to their insurable aircraft, which has helped reduce premiums in certain areas. There's still some carriers that haven't quite got on board yet with the light sport aircraft, but fortunately we have 15, 16 carriers that we can go to.
Now, when you say carriers, that's a term that's very familiar for you. For the rest of us, that means an insurance company that says, okay, we will underwrite, we will take our money and back up the insurance policy that you sell to an individual.
Right. That's
your company is an agency. Is that correct?
We're an independent agency, and so we're appointed by these insurance companies to sell on their products, their insurance products. And so that's who I go to, their underwriters. When there's a new light sport aircraft, I'll go to their underwriters, and part of our job is trying to help the underwriters understand these aircraft.
Sure, I'll bet.
And that's why going to events like this is important for me as well, to help share that knowledge with the underwriters, because not all underwriters attend these shows.
Well, of course not. You know, in the insurance game, you couldn't hardly make a living out of doing just airplane insurance. You're going to have to do a whole line of insurance for houses or whatever it is else you get into. But that means that because they do all these different things, they can't know everything about these airplanes. I mean, those of us that are involved with it have trouble keeping up with it.
That's right. There's changes all the time.
So you're real valuable. But 15 or 16 carriers you have that are willing to take this kind of insurance on, at least with some aircraft in some situations?
Well, I should clarify that. Not all those carriers are insuring the light sport aircraft right now.
They're in aviation.
They're in aviation insurance, because we do all types of aviation insurance.
I know you do,
Out of that group, probably 5 or 6 carriers, companies, will insure light sport aircraft.
Well, that still gives you enough that's what helps keeps the cost down.
It sure does.
Because if there was one out there, they could charge whatever they liked, and
that's a challenge we had in the early days. So it's only 1 or 2 carriers, and prices were a bit more expensive then. And now, with competition, the economy, and everything, prices have remained steady or have dropped in many cases.
And what's been the experience of these carriers relative to people that bought these airplanes and then bought insurance from you and started to go out and fly them? Of course, I'm sure there's been some incidents or accidents and whatnot. That always happens, and that's why people buy insurance. How have been the claims? How has the experience been for the companies?
Well, there's no centralized database that all carriers enter their information, so it's difficult to answer that question. But the majority of incidents that we see are typically on landing. And that's early on. We realized that initial training was most important, especially for pilots that are transitioning from heavier aircraft, thinking that they could just jump in these airplanes and fly it. And so that's really the main area, and it's not too much different than other types of aircraft. So,
well, it's not that these aircraft are any harder to fly. In fact, most of them are probably easier to fly in many ways than a more complicated aircraft with retractable gear, constant speed prop, much less a turbine or whatever. But they're different, and it's kind of like being in a small boat on rougher water if it's that kind of day.
Right.
And the airplane's going to move around more, and they leap off the ground quickly, and they climb steeply, and they don't go all that fast, and it's just a different experience. And I know my organization, the Light Aircraft Manufacturers Association, has been sort of beating the drum with the manufacturers to say, look, if you need to get insurance for your customers, which you do, with few exceptions, you've got to do good transition training. You need to give these people 5 hours or so, time in type, meaning in this particular airplane. And you know, another expression of mine has been all the insurance, all the training you can afford is worth it.
Right.
So it's a kind of a thing that says, look, you may be a great pilot. Nobody's doubting that. But if you haven't been in this airplane or one of the other LSA out here at this show or any other event, you need to get some instruction on what that experience is going to feel like.
Right.
Not how to fly. We know you know how to do that, but how this particular one operates.
Right, and it's not just the hours. The underwriters learned early on, too, that requiring 3 hours or 5 hours flight instruction, that's important, but they've also added a component, many of them have, to include number of landings, including number of crosswind landings, too.
Okay.
So
because you've had that experience where that's been a lot of where the problems occurs on landings.
Exactly, yeah.
So what is the requirement that typically, I know you have several different carriers, they're probably each different,
yeah.
But what's the typical kind of
with someone
request?
with no experience in that particular make and model, you're going to expect at least 3 hours, 3 to 5 hours.
Okay.
And that depends on that pilot's total flight time and type of aircraft they've been flying. You know, that checkout requirement can be tailored to an individual's particular experience.
Sure, and how fast they adapt.
That's
and so
right.
forth too.
But at
is
least
there also a number of landings that you say with the 3?
At least 1 or 2 carriers are now requiring, in addition to the hourly requirement, a certain number of takeoffs and full stop landings, as well as certain.
Do they specify a number?
They will specify a number.
Is it by case?
By case.
I
case.
see. Okay.
Yeah.
So typical person with a few hundred hours, not necessarily a few thousand, who's only flown maybe a 172 or whatever, and he said, "Okay, I'm going to buy this one." What would you expect to tell that person?
3 to 5 hours dual flight instruction, at least 20 takeoff and full stop landings.
Okay,
Yeah.
and some of those in a
and
crosswind?
some of those would be in a crosswind landing.
That's not asking too
It's
much.
not.
I mean, I would say the 3 hours or so of training, you're mostly going to stay right in the pattern anyway, except for maybe stalls and some other things you go out to a practice area to do, but that's not asking a whole lot.
No, I don't think so.
Great. Well, Greg Ellsworth of Aviation Insurance Resources, we really appreciate you talking to us. We can go find your company, get more information about insurance.
That's www.air-pros.com.
Pros like P-R-O-S, like
Exactly.
professionals?
Yes,
Okay.
air-pros.com.
Okay, that's real easy. Thanks for talking to us here today at the Midwest LSA Expo. We're reporting for aircraftreporters.tv.